It's 1961. You're a civil defense inspector in rural Georgia, and you've just opened the door to a federally funded fallout shelter designed to protect 200 people from nuclear annihilation. You look around. There are no beds, no medical supplies, no water purification system. What you do find is crackers. Walls of crackers. Floor-to-ceiling, stamped tin survival biscuits manufactured by the United States government. That's it. That is the plan. 200 souls, one concrete room, and enough bland, calorie-dense crackers to last 14 days. Because someone in Washington decided that if you could survive 2 weeks underground, eating what essentially amounted to compressed flour and hope, you'd walk out into the irradiated sunshine and just figure the rest out. And the truly unhinged part, this wasn't even close to the strangest thing America built in the name of surviving the bomb. So let's rewind, let's go back to where this madness actually started. August 6th, 1945, the Enola Gay drops little boy on Hiroshima. 3 days later, Fat Man hits Nagasaki. The war ends and America is simultaneously triumphant and terrified, because the country that just used the most devastating weapon in human history now has to reckon with a very uncomfortable question. What happens when somebody uses it on us? For the first few years, the fear was abstract. The Soviet Union didn't test its own atomic bomb until August of 1949. And when it did, the psychological shift was seismic. Overnight, the American mainland went from untouchable fortress to potential target. And the government had almost no plan for protecting civilians. Enter the Federal Civil Defense Administration, created in 1951 with a mandate that was, in hindsight, hilariously impossible. Prepare 350 million square miles of American territory and 150 million citizens for a nuclear attack using a budget that wouldn't cover a modern Hollywood movie. They had to do something. So they did the most American thing imaginable. They made it everyone else's problem. The FCDA launched a propaganda campaign that is legendary in its optimism. You've probably seen Bert the Turtle, that cartoon character who taught schoolchildren to duck and cover. The idea was simple. If you see a flash, get under your desk, cover your neck, and wait. As if a wooden school desk was going to protect you from a weapon that vaporizes concrete. But here's the thing. It wasn't entirely stupid. At the outer edges of a blast radius, ducking behind something solid could genuinely protect you from flying debris and thermal flash. The problem was that no one explained the nuance. The message kids received was, "The desk will save you." And it wouldn't. But that was just the beginning. In 1953, the town of Berea, Kentucky, participated in a civil defense drill where residents were instructed to shelter in place using whatever they had on hand. And what many of them had was newspapers. Actual newspapers. People were photographed holding sections of the Berea Citizen over their heads during a mock attack drill, as if the Lexington Herald Leader's sports section was going to deflect gamma radiation. The logic, such as it was, came from the idea that any barrier, literally anything between you and fallout particles, was better than nothing. Technically true, practically absurd. And it is exactly the kind of beautiful, desperate, completely human response to an impossible threat that makes this era so fascinating. Now, if you're a fan of the Umbrella Academy, this energy should feel extremely familiar. In the Umbrella Academy, the Hargreeves siblings face not one, not two, but multiple apocalypses across the series. And their preparation strategy is, to put it charitably, chaotic. Reginald Hargreeves trained these kids from childhood to prevent the end of the world, and yet when the apocalypse actually arrives, they're scrambling, improvising, held together by spite and sibling dysfunction. The Commission has time travel bureaucracy. 5 has equations scrawled on walls, and the actual survival plan usually boils down to everyone argue until something explodes, then Luther tries to punch it. And that's not a criticism, that's the point. The show understands something that Cold War America also understood on a deep, unspoken level. You cannot truly prepare for the end of everything. You can only perform preparation. You can build the shelter. You can stock the crackers. You can teach the children to hide under desks. But when the moment comes, survival is going to be messy, irrational, and deeply personal. The Umbrella Academy just makes that subtext into text. The Hargreeves family is America in the 1950s. Powerful, traumatized, absolutely convinced that the right training will save them, and completely wrong about what the real threat actually is. But back in the real world, the performance of preparation was about to go industrial. By 1961, President Kennedy went on national television and told Americans directly that they should build fallout shelters. Not that the government would build them. That you, the citizen, should go into your backyard and start digging. And America responded with the enthusiasm of a country that turns everything into a consumer product. Within months, there was a booming shelter industry. Companies with names like Peace O' Mind and Atomic Shelter Inc. were selling prefabricated bunkers through magazine ads right next to advertisements for refrigerators and Chevrolets. You could get a basic model for about $1,500, around $15,000 in today's money, or you could go deluxe. One shelter in Fort Wayne, Indiana, included shag carpeting, a television, and a wine rack. A family in Los Angeles installed a pool table in theirs. A builder in Texas marketed a combination shelter and barbecue pit, because apparently the plan was to grill your way through Armageddon. The government, meanwhile, launched the Community Shelter Program, which designated public buildings as official fallout shelters. Schools, post offices, church basements. Those iconic yellow and black shelter signs went up on buildings across the country. And inside those shelters, the stocking began. This is where we come back to those crackers. The survival biscuit, officially called the Civil Defense All-Purpose Survival Cracker, was a 3 by 3 inch, 700-calorie brick made of flour, vegetable shortening, corn syrup, and a will to live. The government manufactured and distributed millions of them in those stamped tin cans. They also stocked shelters with 17.5-gallon water drums that were essentially sealed steel barrels. No filtration, no treatment beyond what went in at the factory. Some shelters received basic medical kits. Many did not. A disturbing number of shelters listed in official civil defense records turned out to be nothing more than a room with a sign on the door and some crackers in the corner. And the questions no one wanted to answer kept piling up. Who decides who gets in when the shelter is full? What do you do on day 15 when the crackers run out? What do you do about sanitation for 200 people in a sealed basement for 2 weeks? In 1961, a debate erupted in major newspapers about whether it was morally acceptable to shoot your neighbor if they tried to force their way into your private shelter. Religious leaders weighed in, ethicists weighed in. Gun sales went up. This was the reality behind the cheerful civil defense posters. Not unity, not shared sacrifice. Fear, hoarding, and the quiet understanding that when the sirens sounded, it was every family for themselves. The Cuban Missile Crisis in October 1962 brought the world closer to nuclear war than it had ever been or has been since. And paradoxically, it was the beginning of the end for the shelter craze. When Americans actually faced the real possibility of annihilation, 13 days of genuine stomach-churning terror, many of them looked at their backyard holes and their cracker stockpiles and thought, what is the point? By the mid-60s, shelter construction had plummeted. The survival crackers quietly expired in their tins. Water drums rusted, shelter signs stayed on buildings long after anyone remembered what was inside. The government shifted strategy toward mutual assured destruction, the idea that the best defense was the promise that any attack would be met with total retaliation. Protection through the guarantee of shared oblivion, which, if you think about it, is basically the plot of Umbrella Academy Season 3. If everyone's going down, nobody pulls the trigger, hopefully. The last of the civil defense crackers were officially disposed of in the early 2000s. Some shelters were converted into storage rooms. Others became wine cellars. One in West Virginia became a secret congressional bunker that wasn't declassified until 1992. The Cold War shelter program cost billions, protected almost no one, and left behind a landscape dotted with concrete rooms full of expired food and forgotten anxiety. Here's what sits with me about all of this. The shelters were never really about survival. They were about the feeling of doing something when the thing you're facing is too enormous to comprehend. Folding a newspaper over your head isn't a survival strategy. It's a prayer in physical form. Stacking crackers in a basement isn't disaster preparedness. It's a ritual to hold back the dark. The Umbrella Academy gets this. The Hargreeves kids train and fight and plan, and what saves them every single time is not the plan. It's each other. It's the stubborn, irrational, deeply human refusal to let go of the people you love, even when the math says it's hopeless. Cold War America did the same thing in its own clumsy, cracker-hoarding way. People built shelters not because they believed a hole in the ground would stop a hydrogen bomb, but because building something, anything, meant they hadn't given up. That's not foolish. That's human. If this kind of story, the weird, true, deeply strange intersection of pop culture and real history, is the sort of thing that makes your brain light up, I'd genuinely love to have you stick around. Subscribing means you'll catch the next one, and I promise it'll be just as odd as this one. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the bunker.